Join us on Patreon and become part of our journey to uncover history's untold stories. Your support helps us create in-depth content, bring hidden narratives to life, and keep history alive for everyone.
The story of the lost tribes of Israel is one of history's greatest enigmas, wrapped in layers of myth, faith, archaeology, and now modern science. For centuries, theologians, explorers, and historians have debated what became of the ancient Israelites who were scattered after the Assyrian conquest in the 8th century BCE. While some claim they vanished into the winds of exile, others suggested they migrated to far-off lands, leaving behind whispers of their heritage. In the modern era, these whispers have been amplified by anthropology, linguistics, and more strikingly, DNA studies. At the heart of this inquiry lies a question that has fascinated both scholars and communities across the world. Could the descendants of the lost tribes of Israel be living in Africa today? The fascination with this possibility is not without reason. Africa has long been a custodian of ancient traditions, oral histories, and religious practices that appear to echo biblical Israel. Across the continent, communities have maintained customs that bear uncanny resemblance to Jewish law. Circumcision on the 8th day, ritual purity rules, dietary restrictions, and the observance of sacred days. For generations, these practices were dismissed by European scholars as cultural coincidences, or dismissed as later borrowings from Christian or Islamic contact. Yet with the advent of genetic testing in the late 20th century, the scientific world has been forced to re-examine the claims that Africans, far from being distant strangers, may in fact be blood relatives of ancient Israel. The historical backdrop is essential to understanding how this connection may have unfolded. In 722 BCE, the Assyrian Empire under King Shalmaneser V and Sargon II conquered the northern kingdom of Israel, deporting much of its population. Biblical accounts and Assyrian inscriptions confirm that tens of thousands were taken captive, dispersed across Mesopotamia and Persia. Jewish tradition holds that these tribes were effectively lost, cut off from Judah and Jerusalem. While the southern kingdom of Judah endured longer and became the foundation of what we know today as mainstream Judaism, the northern tribes seemed to vanish from written history. But exile, as history shows, rarely erases a people entirely. Populations scatter, adapt, merge, and resurface in unexpected places. Africa's link to Israelite history is older than the Assyrian conquest. The Hebrew Bible itself is replete with connections to Africa, particularly Egypt and Ethiopia. Moses married a Cushite woman, the Queen of Sheba visited Solomon, and Jeremiah mentions communities of Judeans living in Egypt. By the time of the Second Temple, Jewish colonies were firmly established in Egypt, Nubia, and possibly beyond. Later, during the destruction of Jerusalem by Rome in 70 CE, many Jewish refugees are believed to have fled into North Africa and deeper south along trade routes. Thus, Africa was not a stranger to Israelites. It was a region that absorbed waves of migration long before modern borders were drawn. Among the strongest living testimonies of these migrations are the Beta Israel of Ethiopia, also known as the Ethiopian Jews. For centuries, this community maintained a form of Judaism centered on the Torah and ancient rituals, distinct from rabbinic Judaism yet undeniably Israelite in flavor. They practiced circumcision, observed dietary laws, and revered the Sabbath with a strictness reminiscent of biblical commands. For generations, they claimed descent from the union between King Solomon and the Queen of Sheba, linking their lineage to the House of David. European observers in the 19th century often dismissed these claims as myth, but genetic studies conducted in the late 20th and early 21st centuries revealed a startling confirmation. The Beta Israel do indeed share genetic markers with other Jewish populations, particularly in the Y chromosome and mitochondrial DNA. While their DNA also reflects intermixing with local Ethiopian populations, the presence of Middle Eastern ancestry aligns with ancient Jewish dispersions. Farther south in Nigeria, the Igbo people have long asserted an Israelite heritage. Oral traditions among Igbo elders describe their ancestors as migrants from the Levant who carried with them the laws of Moses. Many Igbo customs mirror biblical injunctions: separation of women during menstruation, purification rituals, and even the belief in a singular supreme god named Chukwu, akin to the Hebrew concept of Yahweh. In the 20th century, when European missionaries encountered these practices, they often interpreted them as remnants of pagan superstition, but scholars began to draw parallels with ancient Hebrew life. In recent decades, genetic research has revealed that certain subgroups among the Igbo carry haplogroups more commonly associated with Jewish populations, such as the Cohen modal haplotype found among Jewish priestly lineages. Although the evidence is still debated, it suggests a deeper link than mere coincidence. In southern Africa, the Lemba people of Zimbabwe and South Africa present another remarkable case. The Lemba, a Bantu-speaking group, maintain a tradition that their ancestors came from a place called Senna, often identified with Yemen, across the Red Sea. They preserve rituals that include kosher-style dietary rules, male circumcision, and avoidance of intermarriage with outsiders. Their oral traditions speak of being builders and traders, carrying with them a sacred object resembling the biblical Ark of the Covenant. What sets the Lemba apart is not only their tradition, but the groundbreaking genetic evidence uncovered in the 1990s. Studies reveal that a significant percentage of Lemba men, especially within the priestly Buba clan, carry the Cohen modal haplotype, an ancient genetic signature strongly associated with Jewish priestly families. This discovery stunned the scientific community, providing one of the clearest genetic links between an African population and ancient Israelites. The implications of these findings stretch beyond anthropology. They challenge centuries of Eurocentric scholarship that sought to sever Africa from the biblical narrative. For too long, the idea that Africans could be legitimate heirs to the Israelite story was dismissed, partly out of racial prejudice and partly out of rigid theological frameworks. Yet the evidence now demands reconsideration. The survival of Israelite customs in African communities is not just folklore. It is written into the genes of their people. DNA, often seen as the most objective witness, has confirmed what oral traditions have preserved for centuries. Africa is home to descendants of the lost tribes of Israel. The broader question, of course, is what proof means in this context. Genetics can identify shared ancestry, but it cannot confirm theological identity. The Jewish people have always defined themselves not merely by blood, but by covenant, law, and tradition. Still, the genetic connections lend weight to the historical possibility that exile carried Israelites deep into Africa, where they intermarried, adapted, and preserved fragments of their ancient heritage. In a sense, the lost tribes were never lost. They were absorbed into new landscapes, their stories kept alive by communities often marginalized by mainstream narratives. Modern politics and religion have added further complexity to this debate. The recognition of Beta Israel by the State of Israel in the late 20th century led to large-scale migration to Israel under Operation Moses and Operation Solomon. Yet other groups, like the Igbo and the Lemba, continue to struggle for acknowledgement, caught in debates over authenticity and identity. The issue reveals the tension between genetics, faith, and belonging. Can DNA alone restore a people to their ancestral covenant, or does tradition matter more than chromosomes? These are questions that remain unresolved, but the African Israelites continue to insist that they are part of the same ancient story. What makes this narrative particularly powerful is the way it reshapes our understanding of history. The story of the lost tribes is not merely a Jewish story. It is also an African story. It reminds us that the ancient world was far more interconnected than we imagine, with migrations, trade, and exile weaving a tapestry of shared heritage across continents. The Israelites who journeyed into Africa did not vanish. They left descendants who carry their memory in rituals, language, and DNA. Their presence challenges us to broaden our view of Jewish history, moving beyond the narrow confines of Europe and the Middle East into the vast expanse of Africa, where the echoes of Israel still resound. The search for the lost tribes has always been as much about identity as it is about history. For African communities who see themselves as Israelites, the claim is not only about bloodlines but about dignity, recognition, and restoration. For centuries, colonial powers attempted to erase or delegitimize their heritage, branding their practices as primitive or derivative. Yet the marriage of oral tradition and genetic science has vindicated much of their story. It has shown that Africa is not a peripheral player in biblical history, but a central stage where the drama of exile, survival, and faith unfolded. In the end, the question is not whether the lost tribes of Israel are in Africa today. The evidence strongly suggests they are. The deeper question is whether the world is ready to embrace this truth. If history is to be honest, it must acknowledge that the children of Israel are not confined to Europe or the Middle East, but are found among the hills of Ethiopia, the forests of Nigeria, the valleys of Zimbabwe, and countless other places where Africa kept their memory alive. DNA has spoken, but so too have the songs, rituals, and stories passed down through generations. Together, they weave a tale too rich to be ignored. The lost tribes of Israel, far from being lost, are alive and well in Africa today.